So thanks a lot, Jason. Very interesting talk. So if there are any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question.
Can I ask Abhishek?
Sure, sure. Yes.
Hello, Jason. This is Raja from Kharagpur, and it's very nice talk. And you have done great work in terms of this polymer session in turbulent flows and so on. If I understood you correctly, basically you are trying to do this homogeneous and also isotropic turbulence and try to put these polymers, try to model it mathematically by different kind of links, and which takes care of both uh, hydrodynamic turbulence, whatever it is coming, impacting, stretching it, and also some amount of thermal noise is added. The basic drag reduction happens because the turbulent fluctuations are going to stretch these polymers, and some amount of energy really goes to break it up. So locally, the turbulence level, in some sense, taken out by that. So that may not contribute for the shear gradients to increase, but whereas it actually decreases locally, that's the reason overall turbulence decreases. Or am I wrong at some place?
Yeah, thanks, Raja. So yeah, you're largely right. So, but the thing is, even without scission, just the fact that the polymer is being stretched is taking energy from the flow in a sense. So that modifies the transfer of energy that takes place inside the flow from it, what would normally happen. And that is essentially, yeah, at the heart of the thing is that you have these polymers and that they are sucking out energy from the fluid because the fluid has to expend energy to stretch them. And yeah, that's the essential idea from an energetic perspective. It doesn't require scission for the drag reduction. In addition to that, if you have scission, my point is that ultimately the polymers will break. And if they break up, they become so small that they cannot be stretched. So that then you will lose this drag reduction effect.
I see. So they may not really create any recoiling, even though they are going to break and locally amplify the turbulence to such great scales.
I mean, there will be some amount of recoil, but not much because the fragments that survive will become much stiffer. So maybe after an initial recoil, then they will not stretch much.
Yeah. I see. And also, I'm just curious about one of the plot where you try to compare with 10 molecules, or maybe I might be wrong with the terminology. The polymer chain having 10 number of molecules compared with another initial state with 5 molecules is something like you try to run the simulation, so they break up into 5 molecules, and also you parallelly yeah, perfect. So if I understood you correctly, because you begin with 10 and the time when they are going to break into 5, they have more stiffness, or perhaps the local Weisenberg numbers are so small locally. So the way the Reynolds number to be perceived for these 5 molecules after just breakup or maybe scission will be locally so low Reynolds number. So naturally, that's also one of the contribution for this drag reduction. Or I messed up somewhere.
Yeah. So what I've tried to show here is so there are two things. One is so that this plot shows you the time it takes for or the distributions of times for a molecule to undergo the first breakup, right? So the black line shows you that distribution for the original 10 bead chain. So that's the black line. Now, each of these black guys, whenever they break up, they'll form a 5 bead. And then I can measure the time it takes the 5 bead to break. That is the red line. So the first thing to notice is, like you said, the slope of the black line is steeper than that of the red line.
Okay.
That is this fact that the red ones are harder to break because now they are smaller. So their effective Heisenberg is smaller, or they are stiffer and the flow cannot stretch them. So that's why the rate of breakup, or you can see the red guys can survive to much longer times than the black guys. That accounts for this first thing. But what I really wanted to check here is there something special about the fact that these 5 bead ones represented by red curve, that these are daughters, or are they acting just like other parents who might have been 5 beads to begin with? That was the question.
I see.
So I ran a complete separate simulation starting only with 5 beads. That's the blue one.
I see.
And you see that at long times, the slopes are kind of same, but at early time, the behavior is very different.
That's right. That's right.
So that's because when the daughter 5 beats form, they are formed because there was a large stretching of the 10 one, it broke. And so these 5 ones are already in a place where there is strong stretching. And they're already kind of stretched out when they, when they just form. So they have kind of a higher chance to break up again.
I see.
So that's why they have a very strong peak here. So many of them are breaking up at very short times. Whereas the blue ones, which are in a complete separate simulation, they don't have any such special initial condition. But that, yeah.
Just one more minor question. If I understood you correctly, the tails of this distribution basically governed by this thermal noise or perhaps equilibrium way, the thermodynamical equilibrium, how it really behaves. That much amount of time it really takes. Is that right?
These tails are just governed by the ratio of the elastic time scale to the stretching in the flow, the shear rate in the flow. So it's completely flow dominated. The thermal noise doesn't matter.
I see.
Because at scission, it means the polymer is stretched, right? So it's very long. So when it's stretched to large distances, the thermal noise is much weaker than the drag from the fluid.
Okay, I see. Thanks a lot, Jason. It's great work and success.
Yeah, thanks, Raja. Thanks for all the nice questions.
Okay, so maybe Abhishek can ask.
Yeah, please go ahead.
No. So, coming back to my energy flux stuff, is the energy flux computed? Some people have done it, I think, but I mean, is it computed often by polymer the Kolmogorov flux?
Yes.
How often? I mean, are you doing it, computing it yourself or no?
Yeah. So I have not done it here, but I think only Rahul's group has done it at IISc. I have not seen other people doing it for homogeneous isotropic and stuff.
I see.
Yeah. So
you have the velocity field in a periodic box.
Yes.
So
I mean, I don't have it right now, but yeah, I mean, this simulation, it should be possible to calculate the flux.
So we have a Python code. We can discuss slightly privately after this when the seminar is formally closed, and I can suggest how to just plug in the numbers and it will give you the flux.
Okay. Yeah.
So is there evidence that when the drag reduction is more, the flux, well, I mean, you don't compute flux, so or the dissipation rate is lower when the drag reduction is
so the dissipation rate is certainly I mean, for us it's only the dissipation rate because like that's how we measure drag, no? So this is the plot.
Okay.
So if we keep the kinetic energy constant, then the dissipation reduces. So that's what's seen here.
I see. Okay.
With time.
Okay.
So certainly the flux will, be lower correspondingly. And we can calculate the polymer flux, so that compensates. I mean, we didn't calculate the flux, we calculated the volume average, polymer dissipation. So that compensates, so that the sum is equal to 0.5. So that happens.
So total dissipation equals dissipation in the hydro plus dissipation in polymer.
Yeah, exactly. Correct. So the sum of hydro and the polymer is equal to the old Newtonian.
Indeed. So yeah, great. Very good. Okay, so I'm done, but I would like to discuss with you when this thing is formally closed, maybe for 5 minutes.
Yes.
So I have a comment on that. So there's a MHD drag reduction also. So are there any parallels which can be drawn? Professor MKV can also comment on that. So I think there is another talk which I think Narsingh from Delhi gave, but he was talking about elastic turbulence, not so your last slide was a very interesting one where you gave the contrast between elastic turbulence versus this, where this is more like a passive scalar turbulence, where the polymers are not creating the turbulence, whereas here you are looking at the effect of turbulence on polymers and the back effect. But nevertheless, there can be a parallel drawn because there is a direct parallel in elastic turbulence and MHD turbulence.
Right.
But here also, I think there is a parallel which can be drawn. I wonder if someone has done that.
Yeah, so there is a exact parallel if you take the polymer. So I used a Fenner spring, right? So it has finite extension. If you remove that restriction and allow it to be linear spring, so it extends to infinity.
Okay.
And then you take it also to be a dumbbell. Then the equations have a correspondence.
Okay.
So the fact that you have this coil stretch transition here, right?
Yeah.
Across 0.5, you suddenly stretch out, and that same thing is there in the, I think, magnetohydrodynamic thing, no? Where the magnetic field blows up. So that I think those ideas are similar. But beyond that, once you start to put a finite extension to model a real polymer, and then you put that, then those things break down.
Yeah, and so then there's no, the parallel also is not there because.
Okay.
But
should I comment?
Yes, please.
My paper is precisely on the MHD turbulence drag reduction. So the analogy I can make is the following: this flux, no. So in dynamo, no. So I don't know, Jason knows about dynamo or not, but
little I know. Yeah, I know a little bit.
Done. So dynamo, what does a dynamo do? Dynamo, you supply some energy, let's say 0.5 unit, like what you have here, and part of the energy will go to magnetic field.
Yeah.
And a part of it just remains in the kinetic energy flux. So there's suppression of kinetic energy flux, exactly like what you have it here. So this is a paper which I made one-to-one analogy between the two. So we showed in MHD, well, it's known, dynamo means there is a drag reduction. But so the beauty of it is when magnetic field is introduced, the large scale velocity field, URMS, large scale, that increases. So there are structures are more streamlined, you may call it, when in the presence of magnetic field. Now that's a forecast. Okay, now we need to do it in a DNS. We did it in a shell model because we were not having enough time for the referee to reply. I mean, for us to reply to the referee's comment. So I believe there's one-to-one analogy, especially from the flux point of view. And regarding this, Jason, I'd like to make one comment.
Yes.
So the universal theory of Kolmogorov, or universal theory of anything like Kolmogorov, phase transition, in law of gravitation, and so on. So these are independent of the system, right? Theory of phase transition or Kolmogorov theories doesn't quite matter on what kind of viscosity are you using, or what is there in what mechanisms are there in at small scale of hydrodynamics, right?
Yeah.
So I think this drag reduction, that part, the flux decreasing, is a universal property. So that doesn't quite, I mean, that is not dependent on microscopic physics. That's, I believe, the large scale drag reduction. And so you can have two different polymers with different dissipation mechanism or different stuff, and they may show very similar behavior.
Yes.
Okay, that's my, well, I'm not expert in this, so but that's my take. You may like to comment on it if you.
Yeah, actually, that's why I'm interested in studying these questions in homogeneous isotropic, because precisely because of that, because the community that most of the people who study drag reduction look at it in channel flows, and there are so many details about what's happening near the wall and all kinds of structures which are specific to those problems. But the reality is we see the same sort of thing even in homogeneous isotropic, where there is no such thing. So I think, there is something more fundamental than, those Cussel things near the wall and so on.
Yeah.
So I think in that sense, it's nice.
Yeah. So only thing is the magnetic field, there is no breaking of magnetic fields unless there's a reconnection and so on. But I think the breaking part is not there. There's some saturation, I believe, but that probably should be studied with more care. So drag reduction will not stop. It may not increase, but it will not it not get worse when you apply when increase the Reynolds number. I think in MHD that would be the difference.
Yes. Here also, if I don't allow the polymer to break, then also it kind of just saturates.
Yes. So that great. Yeah, very good. So maybe Abhishek, we can formally close the session.
Yeah.